I'm musically inclined, but not musically gifted, if that makes sense.
Episode 9. Episode 9. Episode 9. I am blown away and can't believe we're up to episode 9 of Art Design Music already. If you've been listening since our first show, then thank you so much. How awesome are you? You're amazing. And if today is your first listen, well, lucky you, as you're going to love today's guest, Drew Millward. I'm Judd Haynes, a graphic designer and illustrator from Newfoundland, Canada. Each episode, I host a conversation with visual artists that make work for the music industry. Illustrators, animators, music video directors, graphic designers, photographers, and screen print poster artists. If you're curious about what I do when I'm not working on this podcast, you can find my design work at juddhaynes.com. That's JUDHAYNES.com. And on Instagram at Mighty Pops. Today, I got to meet one of my favorite illustrators and poster artists on the entire planet. UK-based Drew Millward's work is on a whole other level. His use of color, shape, humor, and good times comes through in every piece he makes. His music clients include Primus, Phish, The National, 9 Inch Nails, Foo Fighters, At the Drive-In, The Melvins, Flatstock, Arab Strap, Soundgarden, Mogwai, Jawbox, Queens of the Stone Age, Cloud Nothings, Iggy Pop, and Beach Slang, among others. As with every episode, I've gone back and tried to find photos and visual samples of almost everything we discuss and have added them all to the show notes on our website. So if you want to follow along and actually see the art we're discussing, which I know from all the emails and comments that so many of you have been sending in that you actually have been following along using the show notes, I want to thank you so much for doing that. Then pop over to artdesignmusic.com and find the Drew Millward link on our episodes page. The show notes are in order and include timestamps that match the episode. So if at minute 15 in the episode we're talking about something super cool and you wanted to check that out, you can pop over to the show notes, scroll down to the 15-minute timestamp, and there it is. And if you have never seen Drew's artwork before, I encourage you to hit pause on this episode right now, pop over to Instagram at Drew Millward, check out all of his amazing work. You are going to be blown away. And then when you're ready, pop back here, hit play, and we'll continue. You can follow our little podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Art Design Music Podcast, and our email is artdesignmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Anyway, enough rambling. Let's go say hi to Drew.
Hey, Drew, thank you so much for being here today.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
So many of your clients fall into the music industry realm. Do you play music yourself?
I'm not musically gifted. I'm musically inclined, but not musically gifted, if that makes sense. I used to play in bands and things, so I love doing it, but I'm dreadful. So it was never going to be a career path. The fact that I get to kind of work within music to a lesser extent through drawing pictures is lovely, really.
And the reason I asked was mainly just because almost every poster designer I've ever met is also a musician. For a lot of us, it seems like that's how folks got into doing posters.
Yeah, completely. Like I say, I played in sort of bits of bands and things growing up, but sort of towards the end of us finishing university, myself and Luke Drozd, who is also a poster artist, so I went to university with him, and we started a record label after university, and we also started writing a fanzine around a similar sort of time. And through the fanzine, we started putting on gigs, and those gigs needed advertising, so we started drawing posters.
What was the record label called?
It was called Bird War Records. We were bad at it. It was sort of before people really before the vinyl boom sort of came back, and just as digital downloading was taking off, so we just released everything on CD and then didn't sell any.
Huh. I didn't know that side of your past.
Yeah,
I also had a little record label and also had a zine. It's the funny thing. So.
Turns out that pretty much everyone has a shared history that is almost identical. there's not many poster artists that I know who haven't spent time playing in bands and sleeping on sofas or writing fanzines or putting on gigs.
And do you and Luke still promote any shows now?
No, Luke moved down to London some time ago. I can't quite remember when. And he's recently moved to Norway. So we've lived in separate cities for a long, long time. I think we lost a huge amount of money on like a Tuesday night when 3 people turned up to a gig that we booked an international touring band for, and then just looked at each other and it was sort of like, yeah, let's not do this again. We're not very good at it. You don't get into gig promotion for the money either. So
yeah, the city I'm living in is on the far end of a large island in the Atlantic, and we're the most eastern point in North America. And when you hit our island, then it takes another about 12 hours to drive from where the ferry drops you off to where our city is.
Do you get many bands playing?
It was crazy is actually in the course of about 10 years of promoting shows, my girlfriend and I hosted over 200 concerts by a lot of like really great acts.
Amazing.
And but it's like you said, there was never any money in it. There was never any money in it for us or the bands. Like so many of these bands would come here and play sold out shows and still just barely be able to like break even when you consider all the costs and time that they spent getting here and back. So
yeah, I think everyone knows what they're getting themselves into though.
Yeah. I discovered your work back when I first started kind of getting into doing poster work myself, because it was kind of at the tail end, the last couple of years of when gigposters.com was on the go.
Oh, yeah.
Which I really miss. I really wish that site still existed.
Totally.
Although one pro I've seen since it's been gone is all the work in the world doesn't look the same anymore. There was a few years there where everything kind of looked the same because everybody was essentially using that one source to kind of get inspiration.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It became sort of a slight victim of its own success, I guess. I have the conversation quite a few times with people about gig posters and that website, and it's no stretch to say that it was completely life-changing. I certainly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now were it not for gigposters.com.
No, me neither.
It taught me the basics of how to sort of screen print, and I met people who did screen print who taught me how to do things, and it completely opened the doors, and it was incredible. It was an amazing time, and there was so much great work being made. And it like I say, it was completely life-changing. Sort of through that, I met Jay Ryan, and as it turned out, he had a gallery show in Manchester, which is probably about 16 years ago. Sort of like a group of us went over, met up with Jay, went drinking, and sort of had a lovely time. And about 2 weeks after that, I think I quit my job.
Wow,
that was
amazing.
That was kind of it. I think Jay has that power over people. He's a very enthusiastic man.
I think his work is both really, really incredible, but he's also been so incredibly influential on so many people. Like he's one of the first screen print artists that I kind of discovered and just became like addicted to.
Yeah. I think he was kind of he's on that sort of personal level of actually meeting him, but sort of prior to that, seeing his work, and I mean, it still doesn't look like anyone else's work. It looks like Jay's work. There's people who take elements of it, and you can see that there's sort of those threads of influence. But
absolutely,
it's still just Jay's work is Jay's work, and it's
I did a magazine cover one time actually that at the time I didn't realize, but when I look back at it now, I'm like, I was entirely riffing on Jay's style at that time. It's probably about 12 years ago, and when I look at it now, I'm just like, ooh, like I probably shouldn't ever show anybody that.
I think there's very few of us that are not guilty of that.
Do you remember when the turning point was for you when the poster design switched from being basically working for your own kind of record label? You know, like I look at your client list with like Foo Fighters and Bon Iver and Phish and these massive bands. And was there like one set day where you got that call or that email where you just kind of went like, whoa, here we go?
Really, really early on, I was asked by a band called Swearing at Motorists to produce some work for a tour that they were doing. they were a band that I'd heard of, and that just kind of blew my mind. And then also, very, very early on, I was kind of contacted by Mitch, who ran postersandtoys.com and works for Mondo now. But he very kindly sort of published a number of very early things for me and sort of got me on tour, got me on some of the tours with big bands in America. And that was kind of a huge step forward as well.
That was very, very cool of him. He kind of acted as a proxy agent.
Oh, completely, yeah. Again, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for Mitch.
Are you working right now? Literally right now.
I am not.
Okay. I heard some scratching in the background. I was wondering if that was a pencil on paper.
Oh, no, not quite. Yeah, no, I spent all day yesterday signing and numbering print.
That's the fun, sexy part of the job right there, isn't it?
It took me all day. I forget how dull it is. It's worse than doing your tax return.
And how beautiful does your signature look by the last print as compared to the first?
My signature is nothing more than a scribble, so it doesn't alter. Yeah, it is literally a scribble.
Sometimes when I'm signing and numbering prints, I have to think about it in my head. Don't rush. Don't try and rush ahead, because I know my handwriting is getting worse and worse every time I do it. And if the person who buys this last one, it should look just as good as the first one.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit about your process.
The starting point for everything is with a pencil and a piece of paper. I like to sort of get ideas down and sketch, and it's kind of almost like an automatic drawing kind of response. There's a lot of scribbling and a lot of sort of just playing, really. I think there's a huge amount to be said for just playing.
Absolutely.
I enjoy doing that, and I think sort of the slightly more elaborate, and they always get described as psychedelic, which I don't really think they are, but that kind of side of things starts and sort of develops a lot more through sort of the idea of just drawing. It is almost like an automatic response.
Do you take very much direction from the bands that you're working with? Do you ever go to them and ask them kind of what they would like to see?
It depends. Depends on the different projects. I'm incredibly fortunate that in a lot of cases people kind of trust me to do what I want to do. They want a piece by me for a poster or a t-shirt. They allow me to do that. Sometimes they have a much more sort of prescriptive idea of what they want to see, and sometimes that works, and other times I know that I wouldn't be able to do justice for that, and I've got to kind of walk away from jobs because it's not what I would do, if that makes sense.
Absolutely makes sense.
Not to be sort of precious and an arsehole about things, but I think you kind of need to know your limits. If your heart's not in it, I think it's very difficult to make any sort of decent work, really. I don't think that's much of a surprise to anyone, really.
Do these sketches that you make in the beginning stages when you're kind of working at layouts and that, do you then send these to the band or their management to kind of get approval and a go ahead?
I'm a very, very anxious man. So for my own peace of mind, I tend to send off a sketch at a certain point. Like the initial sketches where I know what I'm doing make no sense to anyone else. So there's no point me sending that to anyone. But I tend to sort of polish it up a little bit. I might sort of photograph it and maybe do a little bit in Photoshop or on the iPad, just to get it to a point where I can say, this is rough, but this is kind of what we're doing. And they'll either say yeah or no or whatever. Because there's no point ploughing hours into something for the client then to turn around at the end and go, no, we were kind of hoping that it would be different to this.
And was that a process you caught on to right away?
It depends on the end product, really, I suppose. If it's a t-shirt or a poster or something, they're ephemera, really. They don't last forever. If it's a record cover, then it's a different kettle of fish altogether. And that's much more of an involved back and forth process, and one which perhaps I don't enjoy as much as making posters, because with the posters it's a much lower level of risk for kind of everyone involved, really. You are left to your own devices because it's not something that's going to last forever. It's a poster for one night. It's not going to be attached to a band's discography for the rest of their career. I think maybe that sort of jeopardy is something that I don't always enjoy. Like I say, I'm a very anxious man, so that
most people that I've spoke to, the album cover project is kind of their favorite thing, you know, for various reasons. It seems like that's like everyone's kind of favorite kind of music related project to work on. I always find posters to be really difficult because a poster has to do so many jobs. Like it has to kind of advertise or kind of be that statement for that event that's happening, whether it's a tour or a show or whatever, and a festival, an event. But then it also has to stand on its own as a great piece of art that someone's going to want to kind of like display in their home potentially for years to come. And then it also has to represent that festival or that band as much as it represents the artist who made it. So for me, I feel the pressure you feel with records. I feel that when I'm making a poster.
I'd not really thought about it. Now you've just worried me about posters now. So maybe I'll never do posters. Maybe that's it. That's the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I think with a record, I always feel it's just like it just needs to represent that music and that's it. But with a poster, it has to represent all these other things.
Ah, shit. now you've done it. I get it with gig posters as well. But like with an album, there's two things. You either love the band, in which case you get the stage fright of making work for a band that you really, really love, which is just terrifying. Or you hate the band and your heart's just not in it and you don't want to be associated with them.
But do you still take that job if you hate the band? You don't need to answer that. One question I have when it comes to working on both posters and albums, I guess, if you were approached by a band that you've never heard before, would you want to hear the band's music or check out kind of what they're speaking about in their lyrics before either accepting to do that job or to use those things like the lyrics and the sound to influence what you're going to make?
You always have to be mindful of the band and either their sort of their audio sort of personality or the visual identity of the band. You can't make the same poster for Motorhead that you can for the weaker than. You need to be aware of that. The challenge is trying to work out how to put your stamp on a range of different styles, and it's fun. I've forgotten what the question was. I don't know what that was.
Oh, no, that's great. Thank you. And also, thank you so much for that awesome Canadian reference there with the weaker than. Well done. Extra points. My
walking circuit is powered purely by propaganda, generally, pretty much every day.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I was listening to propaganda and then weaker than earlier on. So
nice. Well, that's great. little Canadian love. Walk me through the tools. I know you started out creating all your work 100% paper, pens, markers, paint, but you're using a lot of digital nowadays.
Yeah, I kind of painted myself into a corner somewhat. Towards the end of working completely sort of analog, so to speak, with pens and paper and stuff, it was getting to the point where I was having to work at about sort of almost full size, so pretty much A2, to get the level of detailing that I kind of wanted. I think the last poster I did that was fully inked and drawn was the At the Drive-In one that I did. It was just daft, but around a similar sort of time we moved house, and for the first few years I was working in the spare bedroom, which was much smaller, and I simply didn't have the space to be able to be working on huge sheets of paper. I had to look at different ways of working, and I bought a Wacom Cintiq, thinking that I'd use it more for colouring and perhaps speeding up the workflow that way, but it was so good and so easy to use, and it didn't detract from what I was trying to do, and as much as I kind of anticipated it might, it just made things easier, and it's a lot more compact, it's a lot less fuss-free, that I just basically started doing everything that way.
So when you were doing your more analog art at full size, would you then have to scan those in and then put them back together?
Yeah, yeah, that was a real pain in the ass.
Yeah, because I
Yeah,
know getting a scanner that large costs just a
yeah,
fortune.
yeah. I had an A4 one. There was a lot of scanning pieces, tiling it all together.
Have you tried drawing on an iPad?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I got one. It's not clicked with me yet. I've not quite got to grips with it, and I don't think I ever will. I think I'm so used to working on a big screen, and there's a real distinct feel to the way the Wacom feels, which is not the way that the iPad feels. But it is incredible for being able to sit on the sofa and do sketching whilst you're looking after a toddler.
Yeah, because the Wacom does have a nice, like almost a textured surface that when you're using the pencil on it or the pen on it, it does
Yeah,
feel like a pencil on paper.
yeah. I think I probably use most technology like a caveman. I know what I think. I've always had that sort of thought that if I couldn't do it in the real world, I don't really want to do it in Photoshop. So my skill set with Photoshop is fine for making the work that I want to make. I'm sure if someone came and sat and watched me using Photoshop, they'd think that I had underlying issues. but I can do what I want to do with Photoshop sort of seamlessly. It's great. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know where everything is. I don't even use shortcuts. It's just sort of I know what I'm doing with Photoshop. When it comes to using like Procreate on the iPad, I don't. It's like asking me to draw with my left hand or something.
Yeah.
It feels like a massive step backwards.
My girlfriend is, she, like I mentioned earlier, she's also a designer and illustrator, and
Mm,
she knows the software and the programs a million
yeah,
times better than I do. And usually we're sitting in separate chairs, and we, a lot of times we'll be working in the same room, but we can't see each other's screens. But when we sit on the couch side by side, she's all the time pointing out things of how I could be doing things quicker, better, smoother. Like she's just all the time like watches me butchering the software and how it's meant to actually be used. And I've learned so many tips from her. It's been amazing.
there's still things that I do discover and then think, oh, fuck, that over the last 16 years, that could have potentially saved me about a year of my life. I had no idea that that was possible. You've got to play to your strengths. That's kind of it. I'm as good as I need to be, I suppose.
Years ago, I had software. It was all French, which was really funny because I didn't understand almost any of it. Only a few words that I remembered from school. And so I just had to like memorize, when I went to a certain drop down, the sixth one down was the one I needed to do this. And then if some of the screens where it would roll out into like many sub ones, I had just memorized where the like half a dozen tools that I used were. And that probably went on for 5 or 6 years while I managed to get away with that. So typically, how long would it take you to create a show poster from scratch?
It really depends. If I am completely in the zone, I can get a lot of maybe the line work done within a day. That's sort of just completely powering through. But generally, sort of, if we said over the course of maybe 3 days to a week to get everything sort of how I want it, really. But each one differs.
And when you say a day, how long is a Drew work day?
It's about an hour.
About an hour a day. Perfect.
No, I'm pretty good. As long as I've had some coffee, I'm all right. I can get in the studio and be going by 10, and then I'll work through till sort of 5, 6. So it's a full day, pretty much.
Yeah, so you work, normal work hours.
Yeah, I was shit at it for so many years. Sort of working through weekends and things, which I think so many people are guilty of. And maybe sort of, I don't know, a number of years ago, I can't quite remember when, I just sort of said that I'm never going to work weekends again. It's not worth it. There's still sort of times when the deadline's looming. I kind of put my foot down and just said that I'm not working weekends. So I don't, and that helps. That's nice.
When a new client contacts you with, a poster project or an album project, how booked up are you already, or how many projects do you have in the queue? Like, how long would that client usually need to wait until you're probably able to like dive in?
Um, it really differs. I don't like having things. There's a few things that I'm working on, sort of that are on my list at the moment of things to do that have kind of been sat on my list for too long. not that I've lost the interest in doing it. That's not it. It's kind of, I end up building things up too much in my own mind into something that it's not. And then I get that sort of stage fright of, well, it's been sort of 6 months since this was set, and I've still got to finish it. And you feel like you've got to do more than you ever dreamed that you might to kind of make that sort of in some way more monumental, because it's just been sat it's weighted. It's weighted, so you feel like
Mhm.
it deserves more. But generally speaking, maybe sort of 2 months or so, perhaps. I always say 6 weeks is the absolute bare minimum. If it's anything less than 6 weeks, then I'll send you some emails of other people who might be able to
Mhm.
help you out. It's not doing the work; it's the thinking about the work. It's the ruminating on ideas and getting it right. If it's rushed out and you're not happy with it, then you don't want to show anyone. It reflects badly on you rather than anyone else. The band might get a rubbish poster. It doesn't mean that people think the band are rubbish,
Yeah.
but it does make people. That might be the first time that anyone sees any of your work.
Yeah. I was approached once from the management of Fleetwood Mac to do a poster for them. And this was for their big kind of reunion tour a couple years ago. And their management needed a poster designed, printed, and in hand in 48 hours.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah, no problem.
And they're in LA, and I'm in Newfoundland, Canada. And I said to them, I was like, the only way that would even be remotely possible is if, as soon as we hang up the phone, I go and make whatever I want. You get no sketches, you get nothing. And then I go straight to my studio, I screen print it myself, and you have bought and sent me a plane ticket to fly straight to LA, because I can't even put these in a courier and get them there that fast. The only way is if I fly them there like tomorrow morning and deliver them straight to your office. And they were like, oh, well, we're not spending the money on that. And I was like, well, yeah, but I know. But like without being harsh, that's the only, like, it's impossible to turn around this kind of work in 48 hours. It just can't happen.
I think there's going to be a lot of damaged people there that don't fully understand the ins and outs of making a poster.
Yeah, I can't imagine they had one for that tour. Hopefully they did, because I'm sure fans of that tour would love to have seen a poster.
Yeah.
It's just too bad that they waited till like 2 days before the tour started.
They're a band that I'd love to do a Fleetwood Mac poster, actually.
Yeah, I was very obviously super excited when I got that email came in.
Yeah.
And I was very much wanted to do the job, but then, like you said, if it's under 6 weeks, it's just something that's going to be impossible for you, so you pass it on. And I just had to do that with that. And I can't imagine that anybody else was able to turn that around for them. But I mean, maybe someone did.
No.
Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. There's always someone.
Yeah, and I was reading about your poster printing process, and obviously you mentioned earlier, but they're all screen printed.
Yeah.
I read that yours are all CMYK screen printed, correct?
No. A lot of my color schemes are based on. Basically, I'm colorblind, so when I used to screen print myself, I was so bad at mixing colors. Like really, really shit. I had to either buy sort of ready mixed colors, or that was pretty much it. I had to buy ready mixed colors, otherwise I would end up with brown shades of brown. It's pretty much where things ended up. So it's kind of the shortcut to that. I just started using a lot of CMYK inks, and that's kind of one of those things that's never left me. So it's kind of, I suppose a lot of my prints are CMYK, but they're not. It's not the printing process of CMYK printing, if that makes sense.
So it's using the CMYK colors, but not the print. You're not actually layering CMYK and getting like a moire pattern in your prints or anything like that.
No, I mean, in many cases, it's really they're a great place to start in terms of being able to overlay colors just to mock things up in Photoshop. I started doing it out of necessity, and it's just one of those things that's kind of always stuck with me.
And you said you used to screen print, but you don't screen print anymore at all?
No, I was a really bad screen printer.
I'm not very good at it either.
I was shit, and I am not the most patient of people. So there's a good reason why the screen printing process died out. It's a messy, archaic, time-consuming process.
Yeah. And backbreaking.
Oh yeah, no, it's yeah. I'm also really short, so like after a day of printing, I just ended up with I was just crippled. It was just a bad back and shoulders and everything.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I still screen print most of my own personal projects, but for
Yeah,
client work, for like a band poster, I have a series of different printers I use, in different cities throughout North America, and I kind of get them to do it. And
yeah,
they do so much of a better job than I do anyway, so it works out perfect.
they are worth their weight. There should be a national day for printers, so we can
Yes.
all show our gratitude and respect for them. I mean, I'm incredibly lucky. A friend of mine, Tommy, runs Prince of Thieves, which is in Leeds, so it's not far from where we live. It's just down the road, pretty much. So he handles pretty much everything that I do in terms of art prints and anything in the UK. He prints for me, which is it's just an easy process because I can go and sign prints there. I can just go and collect things when I need to, and then any of the American sort of a lot of the work that I do with Phish and things goes through Half and Half, who are also brilliant to work with. But yeah, I think if you find a good printer, then it's 50% of the battle. They can
It
make your
really
work
is.
look good.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, I've used so many different ones, and by and large, the ones I've used have been really great as well, and
yeah.
they've made the work really sing. But when someone kind of botches it, it can get pretty archaic looking real fast.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So, do you get copies like the stuff you're doing with say Half and Half in the U.S.?
yeah. We sort of generally with most of the US posters, they just ship directly from the printer to me, sort of like a smaller allocation, obviously not showroom sizes, but yeah.
And when you're doing that with the both with Half and Half and with these bands, is that something that you have kind of arranged like that? When you set up to do this poster, that you're going to get a few copies that you can sell yourself, and the bands are aware that you're also going to be selling this poster, and everyone's kind of cool with it.
Pretty much, yeah. Obviously, every deal is different and everyone deals differently. What I tend to do is a design fee. If they're sending me prints that I can then sell, that can kind of offset the design fee. Um, yeah, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a way of making things a bit easier in terms of the band and things. Equally so, there's times when it's just kind of I don't get any copies and the design fee is more. Sometimes the design fee is less and I get more posters. Obviously, there's a risk involved with that. You might not sell any, dependent on the band. You kind of almost need to know the audience, and
Mhm.
I think I learned a long time ago that the size of the band makes no difference. It doesn't make the blindest bit of difference. It's how the bands have sort of nurtured the poster sort of collecting.
Well, and the audience and age range of that
Yeah,
band, I work with a couple of bands where their audience is older,
yeah,
and so their audience would be more into my parents' range or maybe a
yeah.
little bit younger, and that age range doesn't care about collecting posters,
No,
and
no,
whereas from my age does, and it's like there's a certain age
completely.
that now that vinyl is back and everyone's collecting vinyl again, the age of my parents, like they don't understand why everybody is back on vinyl. It's like,
No, no, exactly. That's it, and it is a niche thing. Certainly with bands like Phish that I have done a lot of work for, but they've spent so many years sort of nurturing the poster scene. They sort of methodically make posters for every show that they do. They work with a lot of really great artists and things, and it's created that sort of collector base within their fan base. And there's a lot of people that saw my work through that. I suppose it's the same with a lot of the jam bands, for want of a better term. They're really good. They've got their merch game is on point.
well, they've
It's
built careers not having radio play.
exactly,
They've never
yeah,
had radio, they've never had hit songs, so therefore
yeah,
it's like they've built these monster careers
yeah,
doing everything else right.
yeah, completely. They're just great to work with. They're always sort of open to ideas, and they've always got good ideas to throw at you if there's kind of briefs floating around and things. It's fun. It's nice. It's kind of yeah, it's great.
Do you collect posters by any other artists?
Um, yeah, I kind of stopped when I realised that I don't have enough wall space for.
Yes.
But yeah, I've got things around. I've got what am I looking at the moment? Yeah, I've got some old Print Mafia prints up around the studio, and some Mark Padini ones as well, which are some
Nice.
of my favourite. I suppose I started collecting posters before I made posters, and I suppose that kind of fed into me wanting to make posters. Sort of, it worked in parallel with me starting. And then as soon as you start doing any sort of shows with people, you inevitably end up walking away with loads of posters from other people
Yeah.
because you swap them with.
Yeah, I've never done a show. Where the place I'm living is so remote and in the middle of nowhere.
They're they're fun. I mean, they're as fun as they are loads of fun. I love doing them to a point, but it just ends up being a very, very, very drunken few days.
Yeah, for me, I would like to go to one. I don't know if I'd want to have a booth at one because I know that then it becomes work. But for me to walk around and meet people like yourself and Jay and all, everybody's got these booths. For me to walk around and actually like get to see the work in person that I've been looking at online, or meet the people who've been making it. To me, that would be like going to my favorite music festival and meeting all the top bands. Like I would be pretty starstruck and love it, I think.
Yeah, they're great, and I did Hamburg a few times and things, and I like being at home. I'm really bad at traveling. it's just, as someone pointed out, I think someone was checking. I got an email from a friend saying, or a text, just saying like, "Are you all right?" And it's like, yeah, totally, yeah, fine. It's not really, it's different. It's like, yeah, this is all really playing to your strengths.
Yeah.
I was like,
you're like, I'm not supposed to go outside and I'm not allowed to get on a plane. You're like, perfect. I'm just fine.
Yeah, this is ideal. Yeah, but I mean, the flip side of that is I've got friends who rely sort of quite heavily on doing those poster shows, and this obviously this year is now sort of somewhat of a total write off for them, and it's heartbreaking to see, really. But I think as sort of creative people, and in most cases sort of self-employed and self-sufficient, it doesn't really make a great deal of difference. We're kind of the point you're always sort of hustling to a greater or lesser extent. I dislike that word, but I'll use it here.
That's totally the way it is, though.
Yeah, and it's kind of, you're always looking for ways to support yourself and make money whilst continuing to make the work you want to make. So when something like this happens, it's kind of, I think we're kind of built to weather the storm anyway. It's like an innate ability that I think a lot of us have. So it's great to see sort of people sort of, not, I wouldn't say thriving, but certainly it's great to see anyone even keeping their head above water at this point, really.
Absolutely. You've seen the word pivot used so much that businesses are all pivoting. And even for me, like because obviously I'm not getting that much music work these days. I've been starting to make so much more of my own and just kind of starting to create my own art prints and my own merch. And none of it is really out yet. I've just been making it.
Yeah.
I've been every day still going to work and still creating. It's just that there's no clients right now. So I've been kind of making most of it for myself.
I think it's kind of straight. I mean, even going back to sort of like the gig poster days, I remember the conversations that everyone was having sort of 10 years ago on gig posters, where everyone was sick of the deals that bands were throwing down to make posters. So there was a mass exodus where lots of people just suddenly stopped making posters and doing other things, and everyone started making art prints. And it's kind of like, at that point, it gives you the idea that you're not a poster artist, you're an artist. That's just what you do. You make print. It's never anchored to one thing. And there's bands out there still wanting posters for digital releases and T-shirts and all kinds of things. It's kind of, that world is still there.
Yes.
Probably going to take them a lot longer to get their head around it than us, because their bread and butter is playing live.
Yeah.
They're still going to need a visual identity to go along with that in some capacity. It's just a matter of trying to work out everyone's place in this strange new terrain.
Yeah, I remember seeing a talk online a few years ago from Kevin Tong.
Oh yeah,
and he was saying how one day he basically was offered a movie poster project, and the budget was like 10 times or 100 times or something like that what he'd been averaging for music projects.
Yeah.
So he just switched, and he said he hasn't done anything music related in years.
Yeah.
And it's funny because then I watched the Drew Struzan documentary online. That was on Netflix a couple years ago.
Yeah.
He started out in the early 70s at only like 18 years old doing a lot of album design for like major acts, like artists, that, records that are available all over the world. But then same thing happened to him, was he was offered a massive movie poster. And then the budget was so much bigger that then he just started doing movie posters and never went back to doing music ever again. And now is, arguably the most famous movie poster designer ever.
Yeah. It's finding where you're happy and where your strengths lie. It's a strange one. It's great to, like, I suppose over the last few years I've worked possibly less with music. I've done an awful lot of work with breweries. I love music and beer, so
I noticed that you've been doing a fair amount of work with some breweries. And
yeah.
Do you approach that world differently than you would approach designing a poster for a band?
Not really. Purely because I think I've been incredibly lucky to work with people again who want my work. So it's again, I'm kind of given free rein to do whatever I like, which is nice. So it doesn't differ massively from making posters, and a lot of the cases they end up as posters anyway.
True.
So we do sort of print releases that go hand in hand with the beer releases. So it's great. It's just a different world to work in, and it's so much like the music world, or certainly the independently minded music world. A lot of these breweries have started in someone's shed and now are big breweries with lots of staff, but they still have that real kind of independent ethos, which is great to work with. I like working with like-minded people.
Yeah.
I don't want to work with arseholes generally. It's nice to find those people. It's that idea of sort of like when people say like, oh, I'm here to work, I'm not here to make friends. It's like, well, can you not do both?
Absolutely.
Like, I like making friends. I like working with people that I like. I don't want to work with people that I don't like.
Yeah, one of the breweries that I do work with, they apparently had hired an agency to do their branding and some labels, and they weren't really happy with what they had.
Yeah.
And then they were at an after party, like after a concert in their town. And apparently we're standing, just having a chat with some people at 3 a.m. or something over a beer, and said how, they were like, we want our stuff to look like band posters, and they were like, we're just not really sure how to do that. And then somebody there actually just said, well, why don't you hire someone who makes band posters?
Yeah. But that's it. I think there's like a huge sort of like, it's like a real blinkered view that so many people take about until you've done something, no one thinks you can do it. If that makes sense.
Absolutely,
it's kind of like, oh no, that guy, yeah, he makes posters. Yeah, no, he just makes posters. He definitely couldn't design us a T-shirt. It's no, I designed some fabric for my son's room, and then sort of like from that it stemmed where, hey, I saw you that you'd done this fabric. Do you want to design some fabric? It's like, well, kind of, but I've already done it. It's like, that's literally what I've just done.
Yeah, it's actually part of your job description now.
Yeah, exactly. You've made your own this CV.
I know you make a lot of art prints. If you're only really have the 3 days a week to get work done, are you able to allot any time for working on your own personal projects these days?
In a way, I just view it all as the same thing. Yeah, I don't really compartmentalize things. It's just sometimes that I get an idea in my head that there's something that I want to make, and then that won't leave until I've made it. All other work has to kind of be put slightly on the back burner until I've got that out of my system.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of works a little bit like that. That might involve maybe emailing a client and saying, "Can I get an extra? Can we leave this till? Can the deadline be pushed till next week instead of this week?" I like to just be able to kind of do whatever I want at any point. So
sounds pretty great.
Well, it is. I mean, it can be detrimental at times. Obviously, I think sort of like a number of years ago, I made sort of a conscious decision to just start saying no to more client work that I wasn't 100% happy with or wasn't 100% into. perhaps rate went down slightly in terms of client work, but that left me with a little bit more time to do personal work. It also meant that I was enjoying the client work more. There's a bit of a sort of seesaw effect. I think when I'm doing client work, I want to be doing art prints. I want to just making my own stuff. But then when I'm making my own stuff, I'm wondering, oh, why aren't the clients there? Why am I not being asked to do this? It's rewarding in different ways to work on different projects, and it's rewarding to work on different sort of sizes of projects, different scales, different types, working with different people, that sort of thing. Having that variety, I find personally to be quite important. It's years and years since I designed a skateboard, but one of the next projects I'm doing is working on a range of skateboard decks. So I've not done that for ages, so I'm quite excited about the prospect of it.
So who are the skateboards for?
It's a startup company that are quite local to where I am. They've asked me to become involved and work on some artwork for them. So, yeah, I'm doing that.
That's awesome. I've always, since I was a kid, wanted to design skateboards, but I'm right now working on my first line. I've never ever made it. So yeah, I'm very excited. So it's kind of a fun little project.
Oh, awesome.
I want to jump back now.
Yeah.
You went to university and you studied art. When you were in school, what did you picture that you would be doing afterwards? Did it resemble anything like what you're doing now?
I'm not sure I really had any ideas. I was always fairly aimless. I don't think I've ever had an end. I still don't. I'm amazed that I get to do what I do now, and I absolutely love it. But it was never a goal. To a degree, it's kind of something I almost fell into. It's strange. I think throughout school and art was pretty much the only thing it was the only thing I was any good at because I couldn't be bothered doing anything else. I was easily distracted and had no real interest in learning about anything else. I just knew that I wanted to do something involving art or within the creative fields, but I didn't really know what that would be. So, in answer to your question, perhaps this is what I imagined I'd be doing, but I don't know whether it is or not. it could be. I'm happy enough where I've ended up. I like it.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Your work is, again, you're one of my favorite illustrators and kind of designers on the go in the world.
Oh, thank you so much.
I've been, a big fan for years. I'm really enviable of the life that you've carved out for yourself. It seems like you've got everything sitting exactly where you want it. Working from home, you got your family, you got your 3 days, you're working with all these great bands, but also working with craft breweries. Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Well, thank you for asking me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. Cheers. Take care, man.
So that was my conversation with Drew Millward from his home in England. I love his perspective on working as an artist, finding a way to work just 3 days a week so he can balance the life he wants to live with his family while still creating personal art projects and many of the best gig posters in the world. Just amazing. I love that he was willing to talk so much about his process. Describing the beginning stages of working on a new piece as play was very refreshing. So many of us get caught up in trying to make something amazing or trying to solve design problems that we forget that the process should also be fun. And when you look at Drew's catalog of work, you can immediately see that having fun and finding time for play in your work leads to amazing results. Similar to the 2 other poster artists we chatted with on previous episodes, that's Jay Ryan and Hayden Menzies, Drew mentioned that he feels he does his best work when he isn't given too many guidelines by the client and has enough leash to let his imagination run wild. I'm hoping that there are some listeners out there that play in bands that will allow the next poster artist they hire to just do their thing and see where it goes. I just realized that I didn't ask Drew anything about specific posters. I had planned to go deep, looking for the stories behind a few of my favorite ones that he's created, but the conversation was flowing so nicely in different directions, and I was having so much fun getting to know Drew and how he works that we just never got there. I'm very thankful that he was so candid about his process and his family life. I can absolutely see that we're going to have to get Drew back for another episode sometime down the road if he's game. If you're anything like me, you probably have more than a few favorite poster artists, and all of them for different reasons, but not many of them have created as unique a visual voice as Drew. Find him online at drewmillward.com, and be sure to check out his website store for an incredible selection of band posters, art prints, shirts, pins, and more. He's on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you'd like to ask Drew a question or leave a comment on this episode, you can do so by emailing artdesignmusicpodcast@gmail.com. We're dedicating the entire 11th episode to emails, questions, and comments from our listeners. I asked Drew if he'd be willing to come back on to answer a question or two, and he agreed. So record yourself telling Drew how much you love him, or send your question along typed if that's more you. Everyone who sends in an email or comment about this episode will have their name entered in a draw for an incredibly stunning Drew Millward print called Hoppy Pop. I've posted a photo of it on our website on the Drew Millward page, and it's very hard to describe just how incredible this print is, so please pop over to artdesignmusic.com and check it out. If you're following either our Instagram or Facebook, then you're already entered in the draw for this print. I'll announce the winners on episode 11, so make sure you've subscribed wherever you get your podcast. That way you don't miss that one. And while you're checking out our website, be sure to pick yourself up some cool art, design, music merch. There are t-shirts, beanies, stickers, cool little enamel pins. Then you can profess to the world that you love art, you are a design nerd, and you can't live without music. Thank you so much to anyone that picks up a shirt or pin. It helps us cover the costs of podcast software, website hosting, and someday buying better equipment so we can make the show sound better. I want to thank my buddy Lowell Campbell for recording himself playing all the amazing drum beats featured in this episode. Many of you know that he and I used to play in a fun band called Winter Sleep. That was, of course, until I became a big weirdo and left the band. Thankfully, we've all stayed great buds, and they're still releasing amazing records and touring their hearts out. Learn more about them at wintersleep.com and follow Lowell on Instagram at Lowell Campbell. Once again, I want to thank Drew Millward for coming on today's show. He is so funny, so talented, and I really do hope we get a chance to have him back, as I know there's a million more topics I'd love to pick his brain about. Next week, we're winding closer to the end of season 1 with a conversation with an absolute icon in the design industry. Portland, Oregon-based Aaron Draplin is one of the world's best-known graphic designers, having done work for Patagonia, the Obama administration, Ford, Target, Nike, Burton Snowboards, Sub Pop Records, Dinosaur Jr., Dawes, and Bernie Sanders, among a million more. He has his own line of Timex watches and James brand knives. He sells the most comfortable trucker hats in the world, of which I'm a customer. Most of us have seen his Field Notes books. You might even be using one today to keep track of everything from grocery lists to that next big idea you're working on. We have a great chat. Definitely the most personal of the conversations so far on the show. We discuss everything from designing albums, working with bands, and creating merch, to the vultures that came out of the woodwork looking for deals after the deaths of our dads. The last conversation of the season is a doozy, and I hope you'll check it out. That's next on Art Design Music.